Certain the imminent end is near. Phone in hand and fearful? Are you doom scrolling? Let's talk about it. Welcome back for another season of Want More with Dr. Moore, the criminologist of the bed. I'm your host, Dr. Talai Moore. Same host, new set, if you will. We are on set, or should I say, in my classroom. Welcome to Criminology 101. Scholars, let's get into it. So, we're going to address today, as far as our learning objectives, we're going to look at the concept of doom scrolling, the responsibility of content creators, and get some examples that we've seen permeate the news, like the Jeffrey Epstein case and all other kind of cases that have been hitting the mainstream. Really kind of getting this idea, an understanding of what it looks like to be so impacted by the media consumption. All right, so what is scrolling? Well, it refers to this compulsive habit of continuously scrolling, finding negative news and negative social media sources. Even when the content is stressing you out, you are still almost like compelled to keep scrolling, right? It's a widespread phenomenon. So, not just you, but probably most of the world at this point, especially in times of crisis. And so, with the influx of all of the things that are happening here in America and across the pond, you can imagine that there are a lot of crises. We just came out of a global pandemic, and in some regards, I feel like some of us are still left in that space. So being mindful of what that looks like here. Some of the impacts of doom scrolling, mental health impacts for sure, right? Taking in all of this negative information, feeling concerned about it. And that is the next one, these physical effects, right? So the somatic experiences associated with that stress. Another concern is cognitive overload, too much to think about. It can be too much to even hold at times. And that can actually result in this concept of emotional numbness, where you have just kind of reached your point where nothing really gets that emotional response from you anymore. I don't know about you, but I have been on my phone and lost countless hours. And so that can also be one of the negative consequences, if you will, of doom scrolling. And then the last one here, once you start scrolling, and I know it's not just me and my algorithm, but once you set it into motion, those are all of the stories that you are fed. So you have this false sense of reality that we create, or that you created, arise you. So you can see doom scrolling is stressful, right? It almost feels like the sky is falling. And so just something to be aware of for sure. I want to give you some examples of how this starts to impact us. Not sure if you are one of those early risers and the first thing that you decide to do is pick up your phone and see what's going on in the world, but that is often the case for many people. So, waking up, checking the news first, guess what? It's not great news, right? And so having this anxiety that is building as a result of the information that you're consuming. From this anxiety build, we have this emotional numbness that continues. And then lastly, this you fall right back into the whole idea or the cyclical cycle of doom scrolling. So there are some definite impacts, if you will, to ourselves, as well as, just our psyche thinking about it. We often look for the shock value. I'm not sure if you've ever heard the concept, if it bleeds, it leads. But that is actually what kind of guides the sensationalism of all of our media. So this shock value in the headlines, it also ties into this idea of fear mongering, where it creates fear, makes you respond in those same fear induced ways and reduce clarity, I should say. And then this social media exposure exposes us or to unfiltered traumatic content. And I want to just kind of think about that. Unfiltered traumatic content. That means anybody who's picking up their phone and recording and just pulling in any information. It may be very discerning for some. So, what are some examples, if you will, of this doom scrolling and this trauma that it can incite in us? Well, if you been anywhere in the news in the past 7 or 8 months, but definitely today and probably yesterday as well. This guy has been high in the news. The Jeffrey Epstein files have been a point of contention since they first hit the media cycle, and they have not left yet. The concept of the underage girls, the sexual exploitation, the human trafficking, the fact that we don't know exactly what happened, but these 3 million pages are starting to be very informative, but also come with a bit of trauma as well. Some other examples, if you will, heavy in the news rotation that can serve to be, again, a bit of a stressor. All right, so now we have our guy Epstein at the top in a circle of other suspected individuals who that engaged in nefarious trafficking activities. Yeah, that's definitely enough to incite some trauma, don't you think? And so just kind of pulling from that experience, right? You can see that if this is all you see constantly, scroll, 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 it can definitely cause you to have some kind of real physical responses. All right, so we know what the dangers are of doom scrolling. We know how it happens. We know when it happens at the start of the day, as soon as we pick up our phone. And it's probably throughout the entire day until we put it back down on the charger. So, what can we do to protect ourselves from this? Let me give you some practical strategies, because nobody's putting their phone down forever, right? But what does that look like, or what could it look like? Why don't you set a time limit? We all have, instead of the hour or two that you lost, give yourself a dedicated 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes even. And then after that, put your phone down. So you're only able to absorb that amount of information in that amount of time. Another strategy, a practical strategy, protect your sleep. Avoid all media before bedtime so you're not going into your sweet dreams with these potentially nightmarish concerns. Another way that you can practically protect yourself, turn off your alerts, silence them, because if not, you will get beat, chirped, and all the things throughout the night, and that will definitely impact your sleep and all of the stress-related responses associated with that. And then lastly here, browse mindfully. Don't just open up and go at it willy-nilly. Decide what you're looking to focus on and really stay on that. Again, we know the algorithms, as soon as you like one thing or open up one thing, you're redirected over there. So really be mindful on your scrolling. If you are focused on not consuming any violence or trying to avoid certain things, just give it a little bit of effort and try that. Yeah. All right. So we know how to hopefully protect ourselves. We know what doom scrolling looks like, may have engaged in it ourselves. But also just kind of want to shift the focus a little bit to the role of media and content creators, right? If we're talking about doom scrolling, then some of that information is the result, or probably a lot of it, the result of the media content that has been recorded. So, you content creators out there, create responsibly, right? Be mindful of the fact that the entire globe just experienced a global pandemic. And so there are definitely residual spaces where trauma exists. And as you're recording or sharing about traumatic experiences, be mindful of the impacts to people. This is definitely a reflection of responsible journalism. And so if you are seeing yourself in that space, be sure to be responsible with your work. Make sure that you have safer platforms. So hopefully the content will be truthful, non-interrupted. It won't get copied or all of those things, right? So those safeguards that help to reduce any concerns or defaults. Yeah. So you content creators, you know your role here. So create responsibly. All right. Now let's see where we are, scholars, Criminology 101 scholars, in our lecture today. Let me see here. I feel like this may be a space for questions. Are there any questions in the classroom, if you will? All right. I think I hear Cole.
Hello, Professor Moore. I am going to let you know these questions that we have here from the students that are here today. They would like to know a little bit more on perhaps when they are caught up doom scrolling, what can they do to stop? I mean, they can tell themselves, yes, so 15, oh yeah, I'm just going to set myself 15 minutes. But then what happens when those 15 minutes fly by?
Well, 15 minutes definitely to fly by very quickly. I would suggest maybe just setting a timer so that now it's not just you thinking about it, but actually a device that is helping you to account for the time. We know that you can snooze the timer, so maybe that's even a possibility as well, but it'll keep you aware of how much time you spent on the device and scrolling. And hopefully, right, you continue to practice that muscle up here. It will also help you to reduce the amount of time that you're doom scrolling or just scrolling. Here, another question.
Yes. Another question from your classroom that we just received is that they've actually mentioned that they've heard from neurosciences that they actually they don't doom scroll, they don't even watch the news because of the impacts on the brain. And so, from your trauma informed lens, what can you tell us about what doom scrolling is actually impacting? How is it impacting our brains and our nervous system?
Clearly a question from a student at Red. All right. So we think about doom scrolling and the physiological impacts, because that's kind of what I heard you speak on. The impacts can be, like I said, to our mental well-being, our mental health, having reoccurring negative thoughts, thinking negatively or having a negative outlook, being fearful again that like the sky is falling and the end is here. And so walking around with that can have take a huge toll on your mental health, which can also impact your physical health as well. So, just being aware of the psychological connection to our physical responses, something to be mindful of. Another thing that happens is we are over inundated with thoughts, concerns, and all of this brain traffic, if you will, that is like now in a traffic jam where nothing is moving, no feelings are associated with that. It's just like this feeling of numbness. And that is really concerning because it's like the space for indifference, where you can see these horrible travesties that are happening to people and not have a response anymore because you kind of used it all up, if you will, being super concerned in response to information that you are consuming. Overall, when we think about our physical and our mental health, because they are definitely connected, you want to do what you have to do to protect yourself. And so, if you know that you're going to have those impacts, or those impacts are the potential outcome, be mindful of it and be proactive in safeguarding your space and your psyche.
We have another question here from a student that wants to know, in terms of safeguarding our psyche when it comes to the news and what is being revealed from, say, the Epstein files. w- What are some guardrails? And I believe it's in the syllabus on two other sessions that you'll be covering. But what are some guardrails that people, like scholars, people that really want to know this from an academic level, from an investigative level, what can they do uh, when they come across, say, a very gruesome, hard to accept story?
Well, a couple of things here, right? You can always just turn it off, right? Turn off the device, disconnect in that way. I think for a lot of people who are in the field, who work with the forensic population or are working in forensics in general, they have a different way of holding information. Looking at it not through an emotional lens, but through the intellectual lens. Looking at it as a puzzle piece or something to decipher versus holding it as the emotional impact that it could potentially carry. So really the way that you absorb the information, being able to compartmentalize, and then also making sure that you implement elements of self-care to protect yourself from those things. But really, being intentional about protecting yourself. And so again, if that means turning off the device. That could be the safe rail if it means having a little bit more of exposure on how to respond to those types of and incidents and having the professional or the academic preparation, if you will. That could also be something. But whatever you have to do, self-care is the ultimate here. All right, the questions are coming.
Yes. Yes, we have one last question here from a student that essentially they want to know what is it that causes us to doom scroll, especially if it's really bad. We know, for example, that social media is very addicting. For example, right now there's a big historical case with Meta because the algorithm intentionally wants to maintain our attention and in very harmful ways. We know that dopamine, for example, our brains release dopamine based on what we are seeing, but how is that tied to doom scrolling if we know that what we're seeing is just so horrific? It can make us depressed. It can increase our hypervigilance, for example. So why do we do that to ourselves? Why do we doom scroll if we know it frightens us and it makes us feel really bad?
Well, I think that there's a level of probably boredom, right? You know, we are just sitting down and the culture, actually, I'll call it the phone culture, right? That we have adopted over the past 15 years or so. And we're always on our phone, right? Our phone is our camera, our address book. You forget that it's actually even a phone, right? But it has all of those things. And so we're constantly with that device. And so it almost feels like it is a part of us, even though it is clearly not. And so just kind of the nuances of having and carrying and holding, being in a group where everybody is carrying, having and holding. Where do you go where nobody has a phone, right? And so that has just been normalized, just that behavior in and of itself. And then again, it's exposure to all of these different crises that we encounter that again, gain a lot of sensationalism, even if it's just for a quick 15 seconds. But those are the things that capture our attention. The concept, if it bleeds, it leads, which really guides the way that news goes after stories. It is kind of like that same element, right? Like there's a crash, but we can't turn away. Right there, there's these bad things that happen, but yet we are still compelled in some way. And so I'm sure that it is, our interest in what is going on, maybe our fear response in regards to how do we respond if that thing or happens over here. It's also our way to protect ourselves because that thing didn't happen over here. It happened over there. And those types of things happen over there. So we can educate ourselves about it or be informed about it, and that can also feel good, right? We're kind of like protecting ourselves in some way from the travesty of the situation because we can compartmentalize and separate ourselves from the incident. So I think it's multi-layered as far as why people are almost compelled and obsessed to capture the negative, but it is clearly something that is human because we all do it. But another thing is, how do we stop ourselves from doing that? And that's a whole nother level of control and accountability for self.
Thank you so much. I think that concludes the questions from the class, and so we're wondering what comes next.
All right, well, what comes next? Well, the learning is just beginning. Criminology 101 doesn't stop here. So we'll have a couple more sections where we'll do a deep dive into the impacts of the media, of the news that we are receiving, really of the horrific stories that are continually coming out about the Epstein files, the victims. We'll look at what victimization is, who is and who can be impacted, and also this idea around the communal impact of trauma and what does that look like. So stay tuned. We have a lot more learning ahead.